And welcome in everyone into Redacted on this Wednesday. I'm Clayton Morris. So glad to have you here on the show. On this show, we break down the mainstream media narratives that they spin, all of the propaganda that they fire on you on a regular basis. And we've got a busy show for you on this Wednesday. Natalie is off today, and so it's just solo. It's a boys club once again here on the show today on this Wednesday. Today we're going to talk about Russia responding to the ceasefire agreement. Where is President Trump on this new 30-day ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia? Is it all falling apart? Is President Trump making ridiculous demands? In all of this, it's been changing minute by minute. Colonel Douglas Macgregor is going to be joining us here in just a moment to talk about that. Also, reports of USAID employees being told to shred documents ahead of a massive investigation into the corruption, money laundering schemes, the funneling of this money into NGOs around the world, carrying out regime change operations, money that's going to the spouses of politicians. Shred the documents. We're going to talk about that. Also, Darien Gap in Panama, a story we've been covering for years here on the show. Friend of the show, Michael Yan, who's been covering it deeply, is in Panama, and new reports out this morning that the numbers have dropped precipitously, the illegal immigrants that have been pouring across the Darien Gap up through into the United States, including Chinese nationals, basically drying up to a trickle. All it took, I guess, was maybe someone new in the White House. So we're going to actually go to Panama today to talk to Michael Yan about the very latest. Does he see this? Is he witnessing a massive slowdown of illegal immigrants pouring through the Darien Gap in Panama, taking those buses? It was being funded by, American interests and NGOs in the United States. We're going to talk about that and so much more on the show today. But first, we're going to tell you about our friends over at Shopify because, hey, our store here at Redacted is powered by Shopify. Has everything you need to start and grow your business. All you need to do is go to shopify.com/redacted. Sign up for a 1-month trial period. What is Shopify? It's a very easy e-commerce platform that allows you, if you've got an idea to start a business, America's a great place to start a business. You have an idea. In fact, I was at a coffee shop today and there were two young boys who were like fresh out of college. And I was sitting there doing work with my laptop, and there were two young boys, and they spent 2 hours talking about a business that they were launching. They were talking about starting their LLC and their website, and they were going back and forth. And I said, I love America. I love that these boys are creating their own company. Like that's what they were doing with their time. So they could do all of that on Shopify. Shopify.com/redacted. Take your idea right to the people, and nobody does it better than Shopify, allowing you to launch your products almost instantaneously. It's that easy to get set up and doing it today. So we love it. Our whole store here at Redacted runs on it at redactedstore.com. So check it out today. Sign up for a 1-month trial period. Shopify.com/redacted is the place to go. Shopify.com/redacted is the place to go. Well, are we about to see an end to the war in Ukraine, or does Putin smell a trap? Is President Trump overplaying his hand? Overnight, some big developments, and developments up just a few minutes ago, from both the Ukrainian side, the Russian side, and the U.S. side. Ukraine has agreed to an immediate 30-day U.S. proposed ceasefire that opens the door for peace. Secretary of State Marco Rubio last night in Saudi Arabia saying that Ukraine is ready to start talking and stop shooting. And he said, they negotiated for about 7 hours. Hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians, he said, and we hope that they'll say yes and then say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court, says Marco Rubio. As part of the deal, the U.S. will lift its pause on Ukrainian intelligence sharing and will immediately resume lethal aid shipments, which makes zero sense to me. So we're going to have a ceasefire agreement. Here's some more weapons. Here's some more intelligence sharing so that you can launch HIMARS attacks on. It makes no sense. I can't figure that part out for the life of me, but maybe someone smarter than me can figure that out. Russia has responded. The Kremlin does not appear committed to this ceasefire. Putin spokesperson Peskov told reporters this morning that Moscow needs to have a briefing from the U.S. before anything happens. And according to reports this morning in Reuters, another source says Putin's government views this deal as a trap. Smells a rat here. And new developments just a short time ago that Ukraine will not recognize any territory occupied by Russia. So what the hell is happening here? It sounds like it's all falling apart, or maybe, there's 3D chess being played here that I don't know, or 5-dimensional chess. Where's Spock on the bridge of the Enterprise? Because I don't know. Let's ask someone who does know this. is Colonel Douglas McGregor, the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice. Combat veteran, served under President Trump. He's always a calm, a voice of reason in a sea of craziness. So, Colonel, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here. By the way, you don't need to take that Star Trek metaphor too far. Your set begins to look more and more Star Trek-like.
Colonel, where do things stand right now?
That's a good question, and there's not an easy answer. The problem is I'm beginning to think this is turning into a dialogue of the deaf. The Russians have made it clear repeatedly over the last couple of years that they're not going to accept any ceasefire prior to negotiations. They've made it clear they're happy to negotiate, but they're going to continue to fight and move while the negotiation continues. And the problem that the Russians have is that they assume, especially since we resumed these military aid and equipment deliveries, along with presumably more cash, that there will be no end to the Ukrainian fighting. In other words, why sign up for a ceasefire and then watch your opponent rebuild his shattered force just in time to resume the fight after the 30-day ceasefire? So I think the Russians have conditions. They've said they want to denazify Ukraine. They want to get rid of all these people that are associated with the radical Nazi formations that have been committing atrocities and murdering people unnecessarily. They also want to demilitarize Ukraine before they accept any sort of final solution that involves neutrality. So I think the Russian side wants one set of things. We seem to be anxious to have a ceasefire so that everyone can run out of the White House and say, see, we just scored a big win. We have a ceasefire. We're bringing peace. I don't think the Russians are interested in a win that way. They want to see an end to the fighting just as much President Trump does, but they're not going to sign on for a ceasefire without the other conditions being fulfilled.
So where does Ukraine sit in all of this? Do they have a seat at the table?
You know, it's a good question. I think from the Russian standpoint, they wonder why President Trump doesn't simply rid himself of this troublesome man, Zelensky. Remember, from the Russian standpoint, none of this would have happened without us. We're the ones that installed this anti-Russian government in 2014. We're the ones that have backed and sponsored Zelensky. We're the ones that built up, equipped, and trained the Ukrainian force, along with some of our NATO allies, with the explicit purpose of attacking Russia. So their view is, look, why don't you stop aiding these people, number one, and then pull all of your people out of Ukraine? I think if we did that, we would be taken far more seriously. Right now, just to agree to a ceasefire when there's been no acceptance of any of the conditions that the Russians have stipulated, I think is simply impossible. So at this rate, I think we're getting nowhere quickly. The war will continue, and the Russians will slowly, deliberately advance to the Dnieper River and potentially cross it. They may take Odessa in the near future. And in the meantime, nothing changes fundamentally.
I want to play some video now for you. This is from friend of the show, Patrick Lancaster, who just posted this about, looks like an American HIMARS attack, using American HIMARS once again on Russian targets. Just as we're talking about a ceasefire? Watch this. Yeah, so you can see this destruction hitting civilian targets once again. And like, this is how you come to the peace table, Colonel?
Well, specifically, the Ukrainians have targeted civilian locations from the outset. And so from their standpoint, they just want to kill Russians, maim Russians, harm Russians. That's their goal. They can't do it on the battlefield because the Russian military overpowers whatever they do. So what do? They try to launch long-range strike weapons, whether these are drones or, as you pointed out, rocket artillery, in the hopes of doing damage. But this is kind of a waste of time, to be blunt, because while you may hurt some Russians, this stiffens opposition to any sort of agreement whatsoever. So you may end up putting the Russians in a position where they conclude the only way to end this war is to cross the Dnieper River and root out the whole problem, which means eliminate this Ukrainian government 100%.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the bargaining position here and what President Trump is thinking. And I don't know that I can. You know President Trump better than just about anyone. You've served under him. Do you think that the Trump administration is making the right bargain here, the right moves?
Not really, no. I think President Trump is very sincere when he says he wants peace in Ukraine. That's good. That's the first critical step. The next step ought to be suspend all aid, which he did earlier. That was the right thing to do. Stop aiding this radical Nazi government in Kiev that's done so much damage. Get rid of this man, Zelensky. He's not a legitimate president. He suspended all elections. He suspended what we would normally consider basic human rights inside the country. He's tried to erase the Orthodox Christian Church. So I think all of those things that President Trump did initially were right. The problem, though, is that people have gotten around him and say, well, wait a minute, boss. We have to come out of this like it's a win. We have to show you in the winning position. You have to be the dominant partner. Well, at this point, being the dominant partner is very useful if you want to put an end to the war, and you do that by stopping the aid and pulling all the Americans that are there, military, non-military, civilian, intelligence, whatever they are, out of the country. That makes it very clear that we're finished supporting this country anymore. But instead of doing that, he's now saying, well, if they won't accept the ceasefire that we've offered on the assumption that this is a ceasefire they must accept, they don't have to. They've won the war. The war is in their hands. They have the strategic initiative. Unless we're willing to declare war, march our forces into Western Ukraine and commit the United States Armed Forces to a direct confrontation with Russia, we don't have much to say. So the best thing we can do is what was described before. But I think they're telling President Trump, you have to do these things and make it look like the Russians have backed down, that they've lost, and that we're winning. That's a lot of nonsense. The only people we're kidding are the people that are sitting in the United States in the Oval Office or potentially on the Hill. In fact, I don't even think most Americans would conclude such a thing. It's a travesty. But I think that's kind of where we may be at this point.
And we're seeing so much propaganda right now. We're seeing Ukrainian flags popping up all over the place once again. You're seeing people putting the Ukrainian flag back in their social media profiles. There seems to be a massive amount of money and marketing effort to try to keep this war going as much as they can. You're seeing the mainstream media, which is fully in the tank for this. Of course, they want to continue. NATO wants this to continue. You saw the big kiss fest, the hug fest with Ursula von der Leyen and Zelensky the other day, in Brussels. So they really want this to continue to go. How many more people do you think will die? I saw last night, you mentioned the numbers on Tucker's show last night, over roughly 1.2 million Ukrainians dead, not casualties, killed in action. How many more people do you think are going to die for this boondoggle?
Potentially another 50 to 100,000. That would not be out of line with past experience. When you are at the end of a conflict and your opponent has lost, the opponent begins to retreat. This is what the Wehrmacht did during the last 2 years of the war. They began these long retreats. As you retreat, you are an easy target. And the further you retreat, the more equipment you lose, the more men you lose, the easier you are to attack. That's where Ukraine is right now. They have very little left to fight. They have a very small population compared with what they had at the beginning. The population doesn't want to fight. People don't want to continue this. They want an end to the killing. And so you're dragooning people into the force any way you can get them, and they're essentially cannon fodder. You put them out in front, they die, you move on and put more cannon fodder out there. This is unacceptable, but the Russians will move forward, offer these people an opportunity to surrender. If they surrender, they're being treated well. They haven't been harmed or mishandled. But if they don't, they'll just kill them and continue marching west. And eventually they'll all be on the river. And then the key decision will be, do we march into Kiev fundamentally, finally, and end this? Do we march into Odessa, liberate Odessa, which was historically always Russian, never Ukrainian? That's where the Russians will be. And in that process, another 50 to 100,000 Ukrainian dead is certainly possible.
Just unbelievable. Well, where do you think the next 48 hours? I mean, to me, this is like a critical period, Colonel. I'll get you out of here on this. Where do you think things sit in the next 48 hours? These negotiations, it seems like we could go one of two ways. Move dramatically towards peace or quickly in the opposite direction.
My gut feeling tells me, and I may be wrong, but I think this is true, that if President Trump sat across the table from President Putin with translators and a couple of assistants to help with maps and so forth, that they could hammer out a solution within a day. I really believe that. Unfortunately, the people that surround President Trump have been very pro-Ukrainian, determined to destroy Russia, to harm Russia. They've advocated it. I don't think they're going to represent President Trump's fundamental interest, which is to end the war. And I think that's what's happened. They've looked for reasons to keep it going, and they found it. Push the ceasefire, which they know the Russians will not accept.
Colonel Douglas Macgregor, always a voice of reason in the sea of craziness right now. When the president is surrounded by a whole bunch of neocons, I hope that they're paying attention. I hope they let him see like an interview like you did on Tucker or this episode today, and that the president could sit down and actually do that instead of, I guess, talking about Teslas at the White House. Sit down and have a meeting with Putin. Colonel, great to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks to you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Colonel. Well, you think you take we got 5 steps forward, 4 steps back. Here we go again. And we could, to hear the Colonel say we could see another 50 to 100,000 people killed it's deeply troubling. And for what? For inches? Not even inches. For nothing. No movement of a front line. Nothing. For what? All of these people dead for what? For nothing. And we showed you the video a few weeks ago, of course, these moms who are marching, demanding that their sons come home, and the conscription army that goes around and rounds up these people and throws them in trucks. Stop taking our sons. Stop throwing them into the meat grinder. Let us know your thoughts on that. All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. We've got a lot of news to get to today. We're going to talk about these USA aid employees shredding documents. Unbelievable report overnight. And what they're being told. Hide your tracks. Hide all your corruption. We're going to talk about that in a second. We're also going to talk about the Darien Gap and the illegals crossing. The crossings down there have plummeted, according to new data. Is it correct? We're going to go right to Panama, right to the scene of it. Someone who's been covering the Darien Gap longer than anybody and knows more about it than anybody. And he was there and he watched Alejandro Mayorkas leading those NGOs and driving all those people right up into the United States, including the killer that killed Laken Riley. He saw it happen, got on the bus up to the United States where that murder took place. We're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Out of Office. That's right, our friends at Sol, because they just made an amazing way that their new Sol's Out of Office beverages really helps people relax. Like if you're out of hey, I don't want to drink alcohol, I don't want to feel hungover, but I just want to enjoy, after a long day of work, I just want to have something to kick back with and not feel hungover, not feel groggy. Did you know that hemp-derived THC products are federally legal? Because of the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp-derived THC is now legal, accessible nationwide. Of course, RFK Jr., big proponent of it as well. Out-of-office beverages not only come in 2 mouth-watering flavors, raspberry lemonade, cucumber, melon, lime, they also offer 2 different doses, 2.5 milligram THC and 5 milligram THC. Feel the freedom to choose with 6, 12, or 24 packs. And, stay away from the alcohol. Helps you actually with sleeplessness, anxiety, focus, and pain. And Sol was founded 5 years ago by brother and sister duo Mike and Angie Lee. Mike is a former world-ranked professional boxer. Angie is an author and professional speaker who had the desire to create natural alternatives to medications that tackle problems they deal with themselves. Again, like sleeplessness, anxiety, focus, and pain. Try it today. Get 30% off your order if you go to getsol.com. Getsol.com. Use the code Redacted to get 30% off your order. And after a crazy week, try one of those. All right. Well, you see the reports of USAID employees shredding documents being told, hey, get all those documents, round it up, hide your tracks, as everything is being shut down. Marco Rubio admitting that, you know what, over 80% of these contracts are now being voided because of the corruption. The amount of money that United States taxpayers have been funneling into this massive boondoggle, circumcisions in Ghana, NGOs being given money to facilitate the trafficking of children into the United States. Yes, USAID involved in sex trafficking. COVID, the Wuhan lab, like the end, it's an endless list. So just as the investigations are beginning, they're shredding all the documents. Let's bring in Stephen Turley, Dr. Stephen Turley, author of the book, The New Nationalism, How the Populist Right is Defeating Globalism and Awakening a New Political Order. What is going on here? Dr. Turley, welcome to the show. Good to see you. What do you make of this report when you heard that they were in there shredding these documents? Did it surprise you? And what do you think they're trying to hide?
Isn't it crazy, Clayton? I mean, yeah, you can't make this stuff up. And by the way, I just want to say, too, you had Colonel McGregor on. I've had him on my show several times as well. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for speaking truth about what's actually happening with the whole Ukrainian situation. You've been doing it for 3 years. I know I've been following you. You get it, and thank you. It's such a, like you said, it's just a voice of reason and clarity in the midst of all of this neocon insanity. So thank you. So many needless lives wasted and like you say, for what? For inches, for NATO expansion. Yeah. So thank you. I just wanted to say that personally. Really appreciate it. Yeah. When
you're very kind. No, very kind. And I would just say, like, USAID intimately involved in the propaganda, right? So
absolutely. 2014,
this is all part of the same story.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. When I first heard about when I first heard that they were, and I didn't even know there was such a thing as a burn bag, to be honest with you, but I heard about the shredding and the burning. I thought of, Clayton, the very first day Doge took over the USAID building. You might remember that one of the legacy media outlets interviewed this female employee. Her name turned out to be Christina Dry. She turned out to be a speechwriter for Samantha Power, who used to head up the USAID. And she was even later featured somewhat deceptively, I guess I should say, on CBS's 60 Minutes. But she openly admitted, this is the first day USAID got Doge, she openly admitted that when she heard that Doge officials were coming into the building, that she and her colleagues all began taking down and hiding all their LGBT rainbow flags and pride paraphernalia. Do you remember this?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Anything incriminating, they all felt they had to hide. Now, to me, when I heard about this document shredding and burning order, I immediately thought of how symbolic that first day was. So from day one, they have been intentionally hiding anything even remotely incriminating. So it certainly makes you wonder what's going on here. Do you want me to go through a bit of the details of what we've got from different reports?
Please, I'd love that.
Okay, I'm basically seeing four things here. So we're getting a number of different sources on this. The New York Times, ironically, being one of them. So they reported that acting director Erica Carr, she's an Obama and Biden appointee. She's the acting director for USAID. She sent out an email last night instructing what's left of USAID employees, telling them to clear their safes holding classified documents and personnel files. And at the time of the report, it was unclear if Ms. Carr had any official permission to do this, particularly from the National Archives and Records Administration. Because she did, of course, say that they needed to destroy those documents, either shred them or burn them. And that getting that kind of permission from the National Archives and Records Administration is required by law. So that's the first thing. We don't know if she had any permission for that. And then we got word that at least 2 lawsuits were filed almost immediately upon word of this to stop the destruction of the documents and files. And you want, again, irony here. It was filed by, well, one of them was filed by the American Foreign Service Association, another one by a plaintiff that wasn't named by the time. So the identity may have come out since. But they both sued because they were claiming that USAID had not come forth with a number of requested documents that are actually on behalf of other USAID employees who are filing suit against the Trump administration for allegedly illegally firing them. So the USAID is getting a heap of trouble from both ends, as it were. Those who support Doge and those who are fighting back in the courts, they're very nervous as well about the destruction of these documents because they think it could help their clients. And then Anna Kelly, she's the deputy White House press secretary. She came out last night on X and said that the documents involved were no big deal. They were old. She called them courtesy content, which is content from other agencies, that all the originals are still on classified computer systems. So she said, this is all a big nothing burger. So those are kind of the three dynamics that were going on. But then there's the fourth element, Clayton. It's the 500-pound gorilla in the room. And that's the total and complete lack of trust that USAID in particular has shattered among both taxpayers and politicians. A number of Republican senators like Iowa's Johnny Ernst have testified how this was an agency that routinely for years stonewalled Congress, resisted every bit of accountability in producing documents. So you can understand why the shredding and burning of secret documents, admittedly so, would certainly be of concern to so many.
It seems like USAID isn't really a part of the United States government. It seems like they're able to sort of sidestep and carry out, extra constitutional moves here without being, without being under the guise of the federal government. I mean, if you have lawsuits that are forbidding you from shredding documents, you're not allowed to, under subpoena or otherwise, not to be able to shred documents, keep everything intact. Then that would be a huge violation here. That would be criminal behavior. I just don't know who's giving these people the authority to do this. Is it you and me? Is it someone in the executive branch? Where is this authority coming from? Because to me, it seems like these guys operate on their own.
It does. And it largely because it appears because they're just one big slush fund when all said and done. They can do whatever they want because they're the piggy bank for all of these NGOs, right? We now know that USAID was a money laundering operation when all said and done for all of these left-wing special, I should say even better, establishment interests, because I don't know, Clayton, if you've been following Data Republican and her publishing of some of the sleuthing she's been doing. She's brilliant. She works with Doge. And unfortunately, she's been doxxed as well, which is really just shows you how evil these people are. But she helped uncover 7 major NGOs that were all funded to the tune of tens of millions of dollars each by USAID. So we're talking the National Endowment of Democracy, the NED, the National Democratic Institute, the International Republican Institute. And they're all part of just this mass money laundering operation involving, well, in total, tens of billions of our tax dollars being funneled to left-wing causes, both here and abroad. Bill Kristol, right, the warmonger, ultra-Trump hater, he was getting money from USAID for his Defending Democracy Institute. Molly Hemingway of The Federalist published a piece all back in 2018 that traced back, it reported on how virtually all of the Russian collusion conspiracy quackery that the legacy media was peddling at the time came from Bill Kristol's organization. And unfortunately came from us. Right. Because he was one of the grifters. We were
champion of the Iraq War, killing millions of Iraqis. Bill Kristol.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
We supported
everything.
That.
Yep. Yeah. And then, and of course they function as a CIA front. So they seem to be, I think you're saying it right. They're kind of like a parallel government. They are beyond accountability precisely because to hold them accountable would be to interrupt the gravy train. Well, Doge is doing that now. And so that's why I think they're so upset.
Dr. Turley, I'll get you out of here on this, which is, do you think that we are going to see any of these documents? Are we going to be able to get access to what's being shredded if they are protected and classified on other servers backed up somewhere? Do we have the confidence that we'll ever see that stuff, or is this all in the waste bin of history now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I fear the latter. It certainly doesn't do them any favors, because I think we're dealing with something that's very pre-political. In other words, you poll anybody, 99% of the population despises waste, fraud, and abuse. They despise this kind of corruption and secrecy. I think this is one of the reasons why the Democrats have been so incredibly frustrated, is they've been trying to politicize an issue that is pre-political. So I think people will be very upset about it. But in the end, I think they're pulling a fool like sort of Saddam Hussein, and they're just burning the oil fields. And trying to leave as little as possible in their wake. Keep in mind, this system is not broken. This system is operating exactly the way it was designed to. That's the key. And it was designed to be the slush fund that made you think they were humanitarian. So corruption and deception go together here. The whole point of deceiving and deception is built into the cake of USAID. So deceiving and deception is it's just part of the DNA of the system. And I have a feeling they're just going to continue to deceive one way or the other.
Of course they are. They'll try everything. And now, of course, we're coming after their money. And this is when people get desperate. This is when you're cutting off their money and you're cutting off their livelihood and all of the corruption, and you're going after their seething cesspool of, child sex trafficking and all of these pedophiles and all of this. You're cutting it all off.
Yeah.
This is when people get very dangerous. Dr. Turley, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for the kind words and continued great work on your side.
Right back at you. God bless. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're trying to connect with our friend Michael Yan down there in Panama, trying something new, but apparently Zoom was under some sort of attack yesterday. I don't know if you guys heard about that. And one of the back ends that we're trying to use here is just having all sorts of issues. So we're trying to do a workaround here and see if we can get him on here in a second, which we will, but he's having some issues down there in Panama, so we will get there in a second. But first I don't even have my chat room up here. Today's been a weird tech day. I'll tell you that, because I'm hearing myself back twice in my ear. So if I look a little like out of sorts today, it's because I'm hearing myself back twice, and not at the moment, but when I have a guest on, I'm hearing myself twice. So it's like a little disconcerting. And now people are having trouble with Zoom. I mean, multiple websites have been under attack. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, what the hell?
I don't think you can hear me,
cyber attacks have been happening here, so I don't know what's going on here. So, David, can you hear me at all? Let me know. Like, can we do a switch with Michael to get him up and running with some other backup source somehow out of Panama? Because I'm sort of here. I'm flying naked at the moment because I don't know what's going on. So just let me know. Somebody talk to me, or Philip, whoever can talk to me, because I can't hear anybody. Okay, but we've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We are going to talk about the Darien Gap, hopefully, and we'll go through this report about the illegal crossings down there plummeting. It's pretty stark because it was filled with, we had incredible amounts, upwards of 34,000 crossings in February of last year. 34,000 crossings into the United States through the Darien Gap. Chinese nationals and all sorts of people from Guatemala to Honduras, all over the place. And so again, this is going to be really, really interesting if suddenly all of this has plummeted down at the Darien Gap. We're going to talk about that. So yeah, I can't hear any of my producers at the moment. So hey, it's a good Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. Can't hear David, can't hear Philip, can't hear my guests. But that's great. Okay, let's see. Is Michael available? Do we have Michael in? Just somebody let me know what's going on here. That'd be helpful. And or who do we have next? But anyway, we're gonna tell you about our friends over at Crowd Health first, because Natalie and I are Crowd Health users. Okay, so when we were relocating and wanting to decide like what are we going to do here for health insurance, well, guess what? How about this? Health insurance is mind-numbingly frustrating. It's awful. And I'm telling you, it is such a pain for so many people. And the headache of health insurance is exactly why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. Stop sending money to these big insurance companies who profit off of and not pay your bills. Like, I go to a chiropractor, and I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. I was talking with the doctor, and he's like, these health insurance companies are the worst. He was on the phone for an hour. He had like the music playing in the background. He's like, sorry, I'm on hold, but he still did my adjustment. We were talking about skiing and some other stuff. And you can hear the hold music for the insurance company was on because one of his patients, they've been screwing her over. So he's been on the phone for 45 minutes dealing with this health insurance company. He's like, it's miserable. And I told him about Crowd Health. I'm like, I'm so glad to not have to deal with that anymore at all, because you don't have to send money to these big insurance companies. Basically, what's amazing at Crowd Health is an insurance alternative. For $175 for an individual, $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help you out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, so much more, without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. So let Crowd Health help with you today, okay? Yeah, that's right. Crowd Health helps you with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Just use the code REDACTED. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use the code REDACTED. Natalie and I are proud Crowd Health users. So when actually, it's so funny. I'll just tell you a little story. When they reached out to us, like, hey, we're big fans of Redacted. We'd love to sponsor your show. Are you familiar with Crowd Health? We're like, are we familiar with Crowd Health? Are you kidding me? We use Crowd Health. We love it. So, I'm also a client. Big fan of these guys. Crowd Health is not insurance. So learn more. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Use the code REDACTED. Alex Newman is the host of The Alex Newman Show on Unified TV and joins us now to talk about this. So there's outrage. And of course, you can see all over social media, Alex, that people say, did you sign up for this? When you voted for Trump, did you know that he was going to destroy the Department of Education? And therefore, he's going to destroy our education of our young people across the United States. And I think we're in last place as it is. So I don't know how much more destruction is going to happen. But do you see panic in the streets right now? And what are they trying to cover up for, Alex? What's your sense of why they're so outraged?
Well, it's great to see you again. Thank you very much for having me, Clayton. And it would be impossible to destroy education more than it has already been destroyed. And that's not my opinion. I mean, just look at the U.S. government's own data. The Department of Education does what they call the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And their own data shows that less than 1 in 3 victims of the public school system in the United States are even proficient in any core subject. That includes English, writing, reading, math, history, science. So it's hard to imagine a system that was worse than this. Of course, there's a lot of shrieking from the teachers' unions. There's a lot of shrieking from the people who depend on this so-called education system. And, when we spend $1 trillion a year on so-called education, there's a lot of people who make their living based on this giant scam. So Donald Trump's doing the right thing. He's moving us in the right direction. He's not going to be able to wind this whole thing down by himself. He's going to need help from Congress. He's going to need help from the states. He's going to need help from the American people. But this is certainly a step in the right direction, a baby step, because as you pointed out, the federal government has no business in education under our Constitution. But this, I believe, is one of the most critical issues. Long way still to go. But as DOGE starts unraveling some of this stuff, I think Americans are going to be shocked all across the political spectrum.
Let's educate our audience a little bit on the history of this, because the only reason we have a Department of Education in the first place is because of the civil rights movement and the fear that, hey, we got to get rid of, we can't have teachers teaching our kids. Basically like a revolution. Just going to let the inmates run the asylum is basically where this came out of. So the Department of Education was born out of this sort of chaos of that period in the 1970s and 1960s that gave rise to the Department of Education. I think a lot of Americans have no idea, and I want to kind of drill a little bit more deeply in this. Natalie did a great piece on this the other day here on the show about how in April of 1983, the Department of Education, well, we discovered that, of course, it was a nation at risk, that we had an imperative for educational reform, an open letter to the American people. It showed basically how we are selectively making ourselves dumber. It's a national security threat. I'm going to read this for you on the screen. If an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war. As it stands, we have allowed this to happen to ourselves. We've even squandered the gains in student achievement made in the wake of the Sputnik challenge. Moreover, we've dismantled essential support systems which help make those gains possible. We have, in effect, been committing an act of unthinking, unilateral education disarmament. Unbelievable. So we were sabotaging ourselves, and I don't think the American people understand this.
You're absolutely right, Clayton. And that report was just the tip of the iceberg. I quote it regularly. My latest book, it just came out recently. It's been endorsed by a lot of Trump's top people, including his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. I go back to the very beginning of this story with the first guy back in the early 1800s to seriously propose that the government, the coercive power of the state ought to be involved at all in the education of children. People don't realize that this experiment that the government educates children is very new. It's been a catastrophic failure. They didn't have most of our kids in government schools until the aftermath of World War I, when they sent the men to go die, the women into the factories. And it was always designed to dumb our children down, to turn them against their families, to turn them against Christianity, to turn them against their country. And this is very easy to prove, Clayton. I've got smoking gun primary source documents from the people who built this system. So the Department of Education at the federal level was just the icing on the cake. The system was a disaster long before that. Yes, you're right, the civil rights movement and really the teachers union, right? It was the NEA that insisted that Jimmy Carter had to go ahead and do this. And the first person to propose that we should have a U.S. Department of Education, at least very publicly, was a leading communist, Z. Soster. And he said that we needed a U.S. Department of Education that would cleanse the education system of patriotism, of Christianity, of bourgeois ideology, so that we could have a revolution in this country. That was 100 years ago, and they have been working to destroy our young people and to fundamentally transform our country through education ever since.
Let's listen to President Trump talk about abolishing the Department of Education. He's talked about this on the campaign trail, so this shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. Watch.
And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children, because they'll do a much better job of it. You can't do worse. We spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom. We're one of the worst. So you can't do worse. We're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. We're going to close it up, all those buildings all over the place, and you have people that in many cases hate our children. We're going to send it all back to the states. Thank you very much.
So I want to ask you, Alex, because now this goes to the states. What's the machinery here? Because now it's going to go to the states, and you have a state like New Jersey, a place where I used to live, and this is unbelievable because that new bill, I think it was New Jersey Bill A1669, just passed. It's a disaster, and basically that state standards would sort of eliminate state standards in a lot of ways. So who would choose to move there and put their kids there? Now they'll have to sort of compete for your business. But a lot of people just can't up and move. They don't have the money to just I'm going to move to South Carolina, and what's going to happen to these states now that they're sort of in control with these standards, do you think?
Well, it's a very good question, Clayton. And I would say, first of all, it's going to be very, very difficult to remove the influence from above from state educational systems. A lot of these states have already adopted the Common Core state standards based on Bill Gates, based on the Obama administration, based on the Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed by Republicans. Obama called it a Christmas miracle. And so that's not going to be unwound anytime quickly. But you're right. A lot of these states, California, New Jersey, Illinois, they're more radical even than what the federal government has been promoting. Then you look at what UNESCO, the UN's education agency, is pushing, including the World Core Curriculum, which is based, according to the guy who wrote it, on the teachings of Alice Bailey, the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company. You realize we're dealing with a train wreck here. And I would urge parents to understand, even if the education goes back to the state level, which is again, a good step in the right direction. These schools are not going to be a safe place to send your children if you want them to learn how to read, if you want them to learn math, if you want them to learn decent values, if you want them to know which bathroom they should be going in, right? You need to understand the education system is very much like a hydra with a lot of different tentacles. U.S. Department of Education is one of those tentacles, and you can cut off that tentacle, and the beast will keep devouring your children if you keep putting them close enough, and the tentacles will just grow right back in other forms and other guises. So we're dealing here with a systematic problem. Took generations to get into this mess, and as much as I support what Donald Trump is trying to do here, I think, again, it's only a baby step in the right direction, and parents need to beware. This is one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life. Make a good one.
Oh, I totally agree. Well said. And before I let you get out of here, Alex, let's just talk a little bit about Teach for America and Bill Clinton's plan, right? It sounded great, right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to incentivize you to become a teacher, and you're going to move into the sort of an inner city. We're going to cover the cost, I think, of your education, but you have to go to work in like an inner city, sort of a troubled school, I think for, I don't know if it was 3 years or something like that. Then you can go off and go wherever you want. But that's part of the plan. But it was much more nefarious than that. So when you talk about this is like a generational unwinding here, we're talking about activists, right? So many of these teachers they're not teachers, they're activists pushing an agenda, whether it's trans ideology or other BS on these children. And it all came out of this Teach for America. Am I wrong about that? Maybe you can really elaborate more with your depth of knowledge on this.
You're absolutely right. And if you look, for example, the people in charge of the teachers union, the people who run the Teach for America program, we need to understand we're not dealing with educators in the sense that normal people think of when they think of educators, people who are going to impart knowledge, wisdom, abilities, skills to your children. We're dealing with people here who have a very clear ideological viewpoint, who have a very clear vision for where they want our country to go, our society to go, that is entirely at odds with the system bequeathed to us by our nation's founders, by the people who wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And so they see education as a means to an end. And this didn't even start with the recent stuff. You go back to the NEA when it was taken over by John Dewey, who became a lifetime honorary chairman. These guys were crystal clear. He went to the Soviet Union and celebrated what was happening there in a series of magazine articles. He understood education is a means to an end. The left understands this. The totalitarians understand this. The globalists understand it. It's just regular middle-class Americans that haven't yet caught on here. This isn't a mistake. The system is actually working very, very well. And you got to go way back into history to see how we ended up at this point. And the more you learn, the more you will be absolutely horrified.
Deeply troubling. Tell our audience the name of your book so people can go and buy it right now and make it a bestseller.
Well, thank you so much. It's called Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Government Schools War on Faith, Family, and Freedom, and How to Stop It. It's available anywhere good books are sold. And like I said, it's been endorsed by General Michael Flynn, Peter Hegseth, Roger Stone, Glenn Beck, you name it, lots of great Americans. Because, as I said, I believe this is the single most important issue. We're going to lose all the other issues if we allow them to brainwash 85% of our kids. That's where we're at right now. And so I hope people will take a little bit from their busy day and recognize we've got to deal with this one. This is the do or die issue. And thank you very much for having me on, Clayton, to talk about this.
My pleasure, Alex. The book, again, is called Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Government Schools War on Faith, Family, and Freedom. You can find it wherever books are sold. Go there and check it out and do a little reading of it. I think we need to save our education system. And this is, you're right, the most important thing we can be doing right now as a nation to fix this. I really appreciate it. Alex, great to see you as always. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And I apologize again today. We had some crazy, I don't know, some sort of attack or who the heck knows. I mean, with audio and issues and had to reboot everything. And God knows our reporter, Michael Yon, was trying to get on from Panama. Zoom was it was all sorts of craziness today. So, and I was hearing myself twice in my ear the whole time and off and on. And David hasn't flipped the microphone back off and on. It's been like held together with spit and glue today. So thank you guys for your patience in all of that. I really appreciate it. And maybe we'll just open it up here for a few minutes here and get your questions in, any sort of super chats or any sort of other questions. We can do that here in just a second because I don't believe we have another reporter out of there. But anyway, I want to tell you about our friends at American Financing. If you're like thousands of homeowners right now, American Financing talks to every month. You're struggling to keep up, barely making ends meet, drowning in higher interest debt, and it's not your fault. Life got more expensive. Biden inflation took off like crazy. But good news, hey, we got some good inflation numbers today under the Trump administration, and it's down, which is nice to hear. Energy costs also now coming down. Egg prices have now come down. We covered that in the newsletter today, by the way. But if you're still carrying high credit card balances with 20 plus percentage interest rates, and your mortgage sits untouched, you're ignoring the one thing that could turn it all around: your home. And this is where American Financing can help, okay? They have a team of salary-based mortgage consultants, so there isn't any incentive to put you on a loan that doesn't make sense for you, okay? And if you could trade like 10 minutes of your time on the phone for a shot at saving an extra $800 every single month, that's exactly what they do. Just get on the phone with them and call them today, 866-890-8434, or go to the website americanfinancing.net/redacted, americanfinancing.net/redacted, and their NMLS number is 182334, and you can check that on nmlsconsumeraccess.org. But again, give them a call today, 866-890-8434. All right. Let's see here. So yeah, Natalie's off today. She had a scheduled day off today. So thank you guys for suffering through me and this disaster of a tech issue. Let's see. So I can't hear anybody, but D Spirit says kids are taught by their parents on how to behave in class. And yeah. Gas in California, Myra says, is still $4.69 per gallon. And the sound is fine. Good. Christopher Molasante, I like Christopher Molasante from Sopranos, says, Ukraine, hey, can we stop for 30 days to rearm? That's what it kind of sounds like, right? That's kind of what it sounds like, the peace agreement right now. Natalie's feeling much better. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for smashing the like button. Even though we had a disastrous day today, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for smashing the like button. We have 4,000 likes today, and there's 12,000 of you watching on YouTube. So thank you guys for doing that, and thank you guys for being a part of our community here on Redacted. Yeah, we do the show Monday through Thursday, so we will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. The team is going to be working right now after this to figure out what the hell happened today. Everything was fine before the show. Like right before the show, I was talking to Colonel McGregor. Hey, how's it going, Colonel? Great to see you. Hey, stand by. We're getting ready to start the show. And as soon as we started the show, that's when all hell broke loose, you know. So anyway, who knows what's going on? Who knows? But anyway, we're going to fix it, and that's what happens when. Hey, we're not a multi-billion-dollar company, so we're not Fox News or MSNBC or anything like that. We're just a small independent news operation. So we try our damnedest here to put on a free show for you, and we try our best, but sometimes technical problems get in the way. So thank you guys for suffering through with me today, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time with all of the kinks worked out. I promise. Have a great night, everyone.